right, guys, I'm going to give you a little 3-4 minute teaser on what's coming up in full stack next week. So, the first thing you need to know about full stack is that it is JavaScript, but it's a special kind of JavaScript. It is JavaScript on the server, on the command line, and to use that, you're going to need a tool called Node.js. And you're going to know when you have Node.js because you can open a command line and type Node, and you're going to see something like that. And then all of your coding in full stack is going to be Visual Studio Code running under Node. How do you get Node? Thank you for the question. And this is all the notes I kicked out as well, but you can just go and Google it. So nodejs.org, and then go for your appropriate operating system, Windows or Mac, download and run the installer, and that's it, right? Any questions, ping me on Slack, but that's how you're going to get Node. And you can go now and type node-v just to verify, get the version. And if you get caught in something like that, how do you get out of it? Hold the control key and press the letter C a couple of times. There we go. And you're also going to, when you get that, you're going to get at the same time something else called Node Package Manager. And we're going to see how Node Package Manager is going to be part of our story here. So, once you've done that, you can fire up Visual Studio Code, make a new directory to work in. And open the terminal. So you get a command prompt right inside Visual Studio Code. There it is. And you can do all your command prompt stuff here. Whoops. And let's write a very simple program to just demonstrate some JavaScript outside of Chrome browser. So we'll make a new file and give it an extension of JS so the linter can kick in. And then you can start doing stuff like this. So you save. How do you run that? You go to your command prompt and you can say node and then the file name. And we'll talk about programming later. I'm just going to make a quick infinite loop here, and then we're going to move on. See, in a for loop, the first execution context is customarily where you would set your counter variable. The second one is a logical statement evaluating to true or false. If it's true, the loop keeps going. If it's false, the loop stops. And then finally, you would increment your counter variable in the third execution context. If you leave those blank, you will get an infinite loop. And you can get out of that with Control C. To show you one more thing here. So let's say I wanted to add the numbers from 1 to 100. So I could say now I know you guys haven't seen too much programming before, but you got to see it the first time. So we're going to go more in depth in these things later. Mostly this is to just get you to install Node so you can start to do some simple programming. So here, every time I walk through it, I'm going to add the value of the counter variable I to my variable sum, and then I need to control my loop. So the first execution context is where you would initialize your loop counter. Well, I've already done that here. The second one is a logical guard condition that breaks me out. It has to be true until I want to bail out. And I said I want it to go 1 to 100. So I will say I, which is my loop counter, is less than or equal to 100. So when that stops being true, the loop will stop, and I need to increment my loop counter. So I could just say I plus plus, which means bang I up one each time. And at the very end, I can print out whatever the sum is. And it is, in fact, 5,050, so that works. Anyway, now some of the initial work we're going to do is going to be to set up an Express web server. So you've been using the built-in web server in Visual Studio Code. Maybe some of you have worked with Apache or other web servers in the past. We're going to be going to node.js.org. Whenever you do npm install, or nodejs.com, sorry, whenever you do install, it's going to reach its hand in here and grab the package we need. Whoops, it is nodejs.org. sorry guys, it's npmjs.com. Got a lot going on in my brain right now. Yeah, so you're going to go to npmjs.com, and I suggest that you go ahead and get yourself signed up with an account. It's free, and some of the things we're going to be doing will involve, you don't need an account to download from here, but some of your stuff is going to involve pushing your own packages back up. Whoops, let me go and fix this. All right, so I got myself out of that little lockout, right? I got my one-time code, and I'm back here. And here's some packages, which in other classes I have created and uploaded to demonstrate to the class, so you're going to see how to do this as well. And I'm going to show you one quick thing here. Let's suppose we want to make a web server. And it happens that I know that Express is our web server package. If I didn't know that, I could go to Perplexity and I could search for something like how can I make a web server with Node. Several packages I could use, and Express is a commonly used one. It's the one we're going to go with here. Yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead with Express. And that would tell me everything I needed to know as well. So let's go here and search for Express. And this is beautiful, right? This is maintained by the same organization that runs GitHub. So they've spent a lot of money. I guess volunteers and so on have been involved in developing this stuff, and you should take advantage of it. So the first thing we need to do is make Express.js available inside our Node environment, and we do that with npm install express. So I just copy that. Now I'm going to go over to here to my terminal. And if I look over here, I now see that Node modules directory got created, and that is where Express went. And all of these other things are dependencies, right? They're dependencies that got pulled in. Because if I go here, and look at my package.json file, you see that has a dependency of Express, and Express has other dependencies, and that whole graph of dependencies gets sucked in. So anyway, I'm not teaching you this. You don't have to understand it. But I found for myself, it's like you're going on a road trip. Somebody tells you you're going to go to Australia. They say when you get to Australia, you land at the airport. The customs desk is going to be over there, and the kiosk to get a taxi is there. And you tell the taxi, this address to get to your hotel, and there'll be a concierge at the hotel with your program set up telling you what to do. If somebody just verbally talks you through that before you go, then when you're actually tired, you get off the plane, you remember them saying all of that. It's just going to make it a little bit more pleasant and a little bit less stressful. So anyway, that's our Express package, which is going to be our server. And there's our package.json for Express, because every Node project, including yours, is going to need a package.json. And here you see the dependencies for your Express. So all of those got sucked in, and each one of these has its own package JSON with its own dependencies, which is why installing that one package, that one Express gave you so many directories, so many packages here in your node directory. All right, let's see if we can just finish this up by making a quick web server now that we got Express installed. And again, if I didn't know how to do it, I could just go here and grab the sample code from npmjs.com. And I'm going to put it in my program 1. Save. Now look. So this has to do with something called the Node Modules Import and Export System. So we are importing into our program this Express object from the Express package. You guys don't know objects yet. That's okay. By the time we're finished with you, you will. But that's just making the Express web server available in our program file. Now here we're making an object reference to this Express constructor. And here on that object reference, we're calling the .get method. And we're saying that when a request comes into the root, construct the response, because HTTP is request response, right? So we get a request coming into us. We send a response back out to the web server, and we're going to send back, in this case, just some message. Now, this touches on the fact that there are two kinds of HTTP web content you can send back. In your Mads4012 introductory course, you sent back only statically coded content. Whatever you wrote in the file is what got sent. Now here, we're going to see how we can programmatically generate, right? We can write program code, we can pull from a database, we can assemble, we can programmatically generate HTTP content to send back, and finally we're listening on port 3000. If you don't know anything about TCP/IP, port is an addressing mechanism for TCP packets. And if nothing I just said is making too much sense for you, give it another week or so and then it'll start to make sense. So let's make sure we've saved. See there I have an unsaved file change, that number 1. So let's save and let's run, right? So we're going to run now. Now this is just a warning, right? This is not an error, and I'll talk to you about what's going on here later. But let's see if we can fire up our... We should be running a web server now, listing on port 3000. So let's fire up our browser and let's take a look. And you see there it's bouncing back and saying hello class, because that is the message we're writing back out to the TCP pipe. All right, folks, so that, if you can get this far before Monday, if you can just have a little node environment set up, and if you can just get like a little hello world or something going, that would be great. I'll give you a quick 2-minute overview of what's going on with our course here. So the way this is going to work now is we're going to learn how to build web applications. And web applications consist of a certain pattern which is called model view controller. If this was 2015 or 2020 even, or even a couple of years ago, what I just said would be true. That's the older way of doing it, so we're going to teach you that. The newer way of doing it is called service-oriented architecture. Services is the new way of going because of AI and because of distributed web applications and a bunch of other stuff. We're going to also introduce this newer way of service-oriented architecture. Later, maybe in week 2, not in week 1. Now, if it's model view controller, let's focus on that for right now. It's called model view controller because you have the controller, which is your Express.js program. right? What we just wrote, where you put your logic, where you implement your business rules, is called the controller. It's the partition of your application, the tier, the part of your system, which delivers, which implements, which makes it happen, the business logic. Now, by itself, that's pretty good, but it's not comprehensive because, in addition to logic, we need a way of interacting with user. We need to give them forms and get back the response, and that is what we call the view in Model View Controller. So that's your web server with your forms and your interaction with user. And finally, we need some memory, right? If I go to Amazon and I ask to see a list of my past orders and it just gives me a blank page, says, I don't know what you're talking about, that wouldn't be good. Your application needs to have memory, and that is called the model because the database is where we model our business, and we're going to have the model, which is the database memory. Now, some of you might have taken some training in SQL, relational databases in SQL. We're not going to do that here. We're going to use JSON, which is JavaScript object notation, the new way of doing it. And we're going to be using a database called MongoDB. And if you ask how you get MongoDB into your Node JavaScript program, you probably already jumped ahead by now and guessed that it's going to involve npmjs.com. So once again, you're going to go ahead and install, right? You're going to install the Node package. So npm install Mongo. Now here I'm still running my server, so I could kill my server by pressing Control C to get back to my command line. I could say npm install Mongo, and I'm going to install a bunch more packages over here in Node modules. There it is, with some other helper dependencies as well. And if I wanted to make a simple database, I could proceed to follow the instructions to do it. However, I'm not going to do that right now, but that's the way you would do it. So you have your data storage. Now the way it works is you're going to have a user. Let's see if they gave me a stickman representation of a UML user. I suppose not, so I'll just pretend that that's my user. That's not a UML for a user, but let's just pretend. So the user is going to make a URL, right? They're going to go to their browser. They're going to type in URL, which is going to identify your server. And again, this is going to take several hours of discussion, but just giving you a preview here. So user is going to go to their web browser. Type in a URL like facebook.com. And that is going to work its way through the network. And we're not going to talk about how TCP/IP works. I can recommend several excellent courses on LinkedIn Learning. And I think if you're serious about this, you need to have some basic networking knowledge. We don't teach it here, but you need to get it somewhere. So that is called the internet. The internet's a TCP/IP network, and packets flow around. And user puts in the URL through the mechanisms of the internet, domain name servers, and so on. It finds your server. User is served up with your page on their browser. They fill in a form. some routes in the controller, grab that information from the form. Some logic goes out and makes requests to the database. Maybe it's, an e-commerce catalog or something which you'll build for your project. It retrieves some information and then it writes it up as HTML. It does res response.write back out to the browser, and then the user sees it on their browser. So at a very high level, that's what we're going to be doing in this course. So your controller is your Express npmjs.com package. Your model, and we're all going to be using MongoDB. So one cool thing about Mongoose, is we can work with MongoDB. You're going to set up an account, and that is going to be your storage, right? That's going to be your data storage, and then it's going to be up in the cloud. And anyway, we'll get to that later. So that's about it. That's just to give you a little high level overview, because it's always easier to understand where you're going when you have a big picture, right? You're flying 10,000 feet in the air, looking down from a high level, seeing how everything connects together. So go and at least try and get this far, right? See if you can set up a little simple server. If you have any questions, ping me, and we will pick it up next week.